works for many years. We've been told many times that the laws have been overhauled, have been redrafted, international consultants have been brought in. But as far as we know, no new draft laws have been widely circulated for comments on either our minerals setup or our petroleum legal setup as well. And of course, we urgently do need new laws that are up to speed with 20th century developments, not least on the transparency and accountability requirements that are now seen as standard around much of the world. We did see a glimmer of hope in the last Harambe plan that came out, that was published about a year ago, Harambe 2, which mentions a commitment to meeting the governance standards set by the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, something we've been suggesting to government for a number of years. But I think now that the situation is becoming even more urgent because of the discovery of oil off the Namibian coast by Shell, which, if it proves to be a commercial prospect, will present huge governance challenges to Namibia, to the government, to our society as a whole. And perhaps most frustrating for us is the case of the Whistleblower Protection Act. And I'm probably seen as a bit of a bore on this issue, certainly by people in government. But it was passed in 2017 and has not yet been implemented, well beyond 4 years afterwards. It was passed and signed into law in 2017. So we are frustrated by that. We're also worried because we've also been campaigning for the Access to Information law, and that has seen some recent progress in the sense that there is now a bill, an AGI bill in Parliament. But we are concerned that it might face the same fate as the whistleblower law, in that once passed, it will just simply be waiting for years for implementation, with the excuse that there is not the resources to devote to setting up an access to information system. And so just in that context, just slightly aside from the main purpose of today, I'd like to use this occasion to call on government as a demonstration of its political will, and we hear about zero tolerance for corruption from the President downwards, to explicitly include the costs of setting up a whistleblower protection office in the 2022-23 budget, which is due to be tabled or possibly in the next week or two. That would be a real demonstration of political will and a real demonstration of zero tolerance for corruption if they started to move in that direction. So these experiences of limited progress and continuing frustration have led us to believe that we need to take our anti-corruption work to a new level, and we need to challenge the complacency and inaction of government with a new level of energy. We also need to seriously step up our anti-corruption gains across various non-state sectors of Namibian society. So looking at the corruption situation more broadly in Namibia, I think the country is in a serious, grave situation, but not a hopeless situation, not one that cannot be improved, not one that cannot be turned around. Although we are clearly on a slippery slope downwards, and that tends to be indicated in our slide down indicators like the Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index and also the Moebilim Index. Yes, of course, we are still in relatively good places, especially in the Moebilim one. But the indications are that things are declining and getting worse when actually all our plans and our Harambe plans and so on have tried to project that we should be moving up these rankings. So adding to the frustrations that I've outlined is the fact that a number of high-profile cases have either not yet resulted in arrests or are the subject of drawn-out court procedures. Such cases include the Fishlock case, the collapse of the SME Bank, the Cora Awards and the missing millions, the payments to UK-based lawyers over the reparations issue, August 26 scandal, or I think actually probably a whole series of scandals that need to be opened up there. Corruption in the government medical aid scheme, just to mention a few. Other cases have collapsed in court, with perhaps Teco Trading being the most recent and most rather than criminal investigation, such as the Polytechnologies arms deal, which led to the resignation of the Minister of Defence. But as far as I know, no subsequent investigation of any sign of any more further action being taken, despite it being a highly serious case. I think the Namibians also pointed over time to a number of long-standing cases, such as Namibia liquid fuel and the GIPF development capital portfolio controversy, as examples of apparent impunity where no action was taken against wrongdoing, despite evidence, quite strong evidence sometimes being presented in the media. I think one worrying aspect that has emerged more clearly since the exposure of the Fishlock case in 2019 is the existence of a group of untouchables, people who are considered too politically connected to be arrested or even investigated. And this situation of impunity cannot be allowed to continue, and certainly that would be one of the concerns of this project. So in response to this series of worrying scenarios, we designed a 3-year project to be called Integrity Namibia, and this is funded by the US Embassy. The overall aim of Integrity Namibia is to establish a sustainable national anti-corruption network operating across civil society, the private sector, the media, traditional authorities, faith-based organisations, and other non-state actors in Namibia. As mentioned, it will be a 3-year project which over that time period will build a national network of non-state actors committed to tackling corruption in Namibia. It will involve a national mobilisation campaign alongside a series of research-based interventions, including publications and other activities of key policy, legal issues and practical issues that will inform the mobilisation work. The project will also include the establishment of an online whistleblower platform. I did put together a few slides actually just to explain that. First of all, I'd just like to say that that set of headlines, which is slightly outdated now, I mean, that shows the level of corruption reporting in the media. And I must say that, in general, the media are doing a great job in exposing corruption. Maybe sometimes there's a lack of follow-up and consistency, but in terms of exposing corruption, they're doing a great job. But it can be overwhelming. It's almost impossible to keep a track on all these cases and to see where action is taken and more often where action often isn't taken. So as I said, that's the central aim of the project. So the key aspects will be a national mobilisation campaign. We'll continue to do research, so we won't neglect our core mandate, which is as a think tank to publish research. In one part of this project, which I will explain a bit more about just now, is to establish an online whistleblower portal or whistleblower reporting platform. And then we don't want to be one of these flash in the pan projects that creates a bit of a stir for a short while and then disappears. I think we all know that's often a pattern. So we need to make sure that whatever we build in terms of an anti-corruption network is sustainable and will exist beyond the time frame of the project. So activities that we're going to start up in the next few weeks initially will be consultations and focus groups with various sectors to try and get their views on what they think is important, how they think a national network or a national alliance against corruption could work, how it could be effective, what would be the roles and responsibilities of those who support it. And we will follow that with a series of regional mobilising conferences. So I know we can often be accused of being window-based or window-centric because we have limited resources and we aren't always able to go into the regions. But on this particular project, we do have some funding to be able to have some regional activities, regional mobilising conferences. We'll be doing publications as well, the whistleblower reporting platform. We hope to set that up by May. And then finally, after a lot of this work has been done, we hope to have a national conference to launch the anti-corruption work, which will be nationwide. So just on the whistleblower platform, and we are still working hard on the modalities and how to set this up, because obviously have secure communication with potential whistleblowers, and to ensure confidentiality and the protection of whistleblowers. And then, of course, we're not the ACC, we're not an investigative body as per the official part of the government of the state. So we have to look at what actions can be taken. We do have the options to investigate cases and reports that come to us. We do also have the option to enter into cooperation and partnerships with the media to expose corruption. We can also refer to any other cases to any other body, but all of this will be done in consultation with permission of the whistleblower. So the action options depend very much on what the whistleblower wants to do. We know that the state option is not always trusted. The ACC are other official bodies, so it may be that people would prefer to expose established whistleblowing evidence in the media. So these are the protocols that we're working out over the next couple of months to make sure that this platform is secure, but also is effective. We don't know how many reports we might get. Evidence from South Africa is where there's an organisation called Corruption Watch, and Corruption Watch, in many ways, although it's much bigger than what we are proposing, does similar things to what we are looking at. They have a reporting platform. They get dozens of reports a week. Obviously, it's a much bigger country. So we'll have to see and also plan to be able to cope with the number of reports we might get. And just, finally, I'm sort of going to end, I think, with a couple of quotes. And obviously, just on the whistleblowing, we are launching this because the government has delayed it so long and shows no sign of actually implementing the whistleblower protection system in the short to medium term. So we were told last year that money was allocated in the budget of the Ministry of Justice to set up some kind of skeleton office, but actually, as far as I can work out, there was never any money allocated. And what happened was that the staffing structure was drawn up and sent to the Public Service Commission for Whistleblower Protection Office, where, as far as I know, it still lies. We are told by the Ministry of Finance that the costs of setting up a Whistleblower Protection Office are so huge they cannot be contemplated at the moment. But if you look at the Act, and maybe this is one of the research papers we'll do, is the costing of the Whistleblower Protection System in Namibia. The office is not actually that huge, and there's not such a huge staff complement, and also people can be seconded from other parts of government. They don't want to be new posts. So I would sort of tentatively dispute that the cost is necessarily so high that it could not be easily contemplated. Because it seems just like a too easy excuse for the government just to put this off and keep putting it off for years and years. And as I say, the very quickly access to information office will face the same prospect as well. So we're setting this up because of this frustration, because I think we need to say enough is enough. We need to act now. Those of us outside government, outside the state, who can do something should do something. And we hope that this platform, this project of Integrity Namibia will allow that to happen. So there's a couple of quotes which I think are often used in the context of corruption and wrongdoing. The first one is usually attributed to Edmund Burke, who was an Irish statesman a couple of hundred years ago, but actually he's fact checkers, and we also do fact checking now. To balance that, and it's not clear who actually said this. And maybe that's good, because it should have public ownership. This quote is so good, apart from the sexist language. So the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And just to add to that, a quote from Martin Luther King: our lives begin to end the day we become silent and about the things that matter. So those are kind of our starting points, really. We need to act as a society against corruption. We can't leave it to others. And the kind of frustrations and anger that we saw after Fish Rock was exposed, well, we had one of the bigger demonstrations on the street marching to the office of the ACC. That's largely dissipated now, and we don't see it. So we need to channel that kind of outrage different representative bodies and different people in these sectors in the next weeks and months about this. So we need the private sector to stand up. We need the lawyers to stand up. I mean, maybe you might say, well, the lawyers are just private sector. But, you know, the lawyers, the legal profession in this country has been heavily tainted by the fish oil scandal. And again, the impunity of certain rotten actors in the legal profession who are still operating, and no challenge, no effective challenge from the law society or any other professional bodies is deeply worrying. We need the faith-based organisations and churches to stand up. We need civil society to do a much better job. We need academia to stand up. And we need the sectors that are already playing a good role, like the media also, to stand up and extend their commitment on these issues. So, in closing, I'd just like to say this is not just me. So I'm going to be the coordinator of this project. But also on our team is Tilane Mongudi, who's here. Tilane is in the house at the back. So Tilane Mongudi, you probably recognize as a very experienced investigative journalist, and he will be working as our main investigator and researcher on this project. And then Roswitha Mlungu, who's also here. Roswitha is also at the back. She's a law graduate from the University of Namibia, so she'll also be working in a research capacity on this project. Titus Adua, I don't know if Titus is here, but he's an ICT expert who will be assisting us with the ICT elements of the project, primarily the setting up of the whistleblower protection, so the whistleblower reporting platform is an online platform. Johanna will, she's going to be the project accountant and handling administration issues. And then finally, I'd just also like to acknowledge Raquel Andres of the US Embassy, because we can't do this without the support of partners and donors, and in this case, the US Embassy has really stepped up to support what is, for us, a significant and also quite a long-term project over 3 years. So I think, you know, our hope is that Integrity Namibia can't do everything, but it can play an important role in making sure that corruption is tackled more effectively in the future, and making sure that people involved in corruption and wrongdoing are held to account. So on that note, as I said, I don't want to go on for too long. This is just to introduce the project, but if you have any questions or queries about what we're doing, the next public event will probably be a conference at the coast in 2 to 3 months, plus the launch of the website with the whistleblower online reporting platform. We're going to try and learn from others' experiences on that as well, including Corruption Watch in South Africa and the African Whistleblower Protection Platform, as well as other bodies who have run civil society whistleblower reporting platforms. Then we'll be working amongst the different sectors in society over the next 2 to 3 months to have focus groups, maybe calling some of you to small consultation meetings so that we can get a good idea of what people think might work in Namibia, how this can be organised effectively. So if there are any questions or points, issues that people would like to know more about, so the floor is open. To set up a national anti-corruption network, which will seek to get non-state actors across Namibian society involved in opposing and fighting corruption. And the reason why that's happening is because we feel, and I think a lot of people feel, that corruption is now at a very serious grave stage in Namibia. And we can't leave it just to politicians or a few agencies. There has to be a broad societal commitment to tackling corruption, to holding those in power to account, and to making sure those institutions and agencies that are supposed to deal with wrongdoing and corruption are actually playing their proper role. So that's it in the gist, but also as part of it, we will be launching a whistleblower protection, a whistleblower reporting platform online, which will allow people to come forward confidentially to report corruption, but also whistleblowing applies to various kinds of wrongdoing, which we have limited capacity, but some capacity to investigate, and also to try and work with partners in the media and other institutions to make sure that these reports are not simply just left lying, but that there is action taken on them, and that if necessary, the right people will be alerted and told that there are serious issues. So, and obviously this is happening again because of inaction on the government's part, because we've been waiting 4 years for the operationalisation of the Whistleblower Protection Act. And really, that's too long if you want to go on international stages and say that you have zero tolerance for corruption in Namibia, and yet you don't do the fundamental things that are mentioned in many of our commitments on international commitments on corruption, such as the UN Convention Against Corruption. This will be hopefully a catalyst for that kind of action.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul from the British High Commission. It's a really good project, Grant, and obviously thanks to our US colleagues for taking this forward. On the whistleblower platform, the last action point says action option. It says investigation, media cooperation, etc. So within the team, we mentioned that you guys won't necessarily be doing investigations because that's sort of parallel to what the ACC thing. So could you
we're still working out the modalities, but it looks like we will have the ability to investigate certain reports ourselves through Delaney and colleagues. And also, we have the option to alert the media, to work with specific journalists, specific media houses on particular issues. So that would be, obviously, the reason why somebody might come to us is because they don't trust official systems. So they may be options that would be preferable for a lot of people, but we don't want to leave out other bodies, so the Anti-Corruption Commission and the police. If the whistleblower feels that's where their material, their evidence should be directed, we can also hand over whatever evidence documents we have, as long as we have the agreement to the whistleblower to go forward to the Ombudsman, but also play a role here, because he obviously has a concern on human rights and environmental issues. There are a number of possibilities, and as I say, the overriding thing is that we protect the whistleblower and that we act with their cooperation. That's the fundamental principle behind it. Hopefully, then it will produce action. It's something that's not been done in Namibia before, not formally anyway. Of course, you could say that the media also receiving tip-offs and that kind of information, but hopefully this will be a formal way in which we can ensure security and confidentiality. Brigitte.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Brigitte, freelance journalist. I just would like to know, how do you protect also the people who investigate for you? That's one, because journalists have experience that if they are on an investigation, they get phone calls and also print videos threats by the men with the dark glasses to stop investigating.
Yeah.
And it has become quite an issue. Also, there are quite ardent hackers in this country in the meantime who hack your WhatsApp account and to try and blackmail you if you investigate something. And then you do get something as unorthodox as our previous mayor, Dr. Mopanda, who within, I think, 4 days managed to make the defense minister resign, because people didn't trust anybody, but he got all the documents and he put them on Facebook, and that was the end of the defense minister.
Yeah.
So how are you going to protect those who investigate for you? And where is something like you said, box where one can drop a document, or must we throw them over the fingers of the house, which has happened before, by the way, with other institutions?
Yeah, I mean, as a civil society organisation, we do have some experience in intimidation as well, although probably not on the scale of the media and the journalists have been going through. But so we're a little bit familiar with that, and I don't think Delaney wants to comment further. But honestly, he's an experienced investigative journalist, and we are also talking about how we can make sure that we do protect our own people. But it's difficult. There is risk definitely involved in this. Is there risk involved in being an out there journalist who will report bravely and openly on a range of issues, including corruption. So we'll be looking at that and see what we can do to make sure people are not put in places of situations of risk. But it is a sort of occupational hazard, as you know, but we have to try to minimize it and also to support people when they do face any kind of even social media sort of attacks or trolling, which is more what happens with us than actual direct threats. I've only had one threat of physical violence. So it seems maybe worrying, but we have to look at that. We have to bear it in mind, and definitely maybe we should talk to our journalistic colleagues as well about how the media houses do to try and offer some level of reduced risk, at least, for their people. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. I think for me, maybe just a worry. I thought perhaps investigation is really another phase.
And what's evidence that is submitted to them, so it's our job to try and put forward a very clear case that some kind of action needs to be taken.
Nielsen, my second section is on the awareness part. I just wanted to know, since as an anti-corruption commission also doing the same awareness on integrity and ethics, is that not a situation, or how do you, where do you draw the line there? Because we are doing the similar things, awareness on integrity and ethics.
As far as I know, and that's even in the new strategy that's been talked about, that the SEC is looking for civil society to exactly do this kind of things to complement the work that you do. We all work with limited resources, so if we can also focus on public education work in different sectors of our society, it could well bolster and complement what the SEC is doing. So we're not intending to undermine what the SEC is doing. Where possible, we'll try to collaborate. I'm going to the coast tomorrow to speak at an ACC event in Stockholm, so on transparency in local and regional government. So we would like to work together, and one of the things we'll be doing in the next few weeks and a couple of months is coming to talk to you about what you do, and maybe make sure that we don't completely duplicate what you do, that we find ways of complementing the work that the SEC does and focus on areas that will actually strengthen overall the public education on corruption. Yes, Gladys.
Hi, Graham. As part of your initiative, what do you think, how big a role would preventative strategy play? What are some of the specific preventative strategies that you have in mind? And also a very burning issue, how do you see unexplained fraud as a measure of addressing corruption? When I say unexplained fraud, it is of course the process or the mechanism provided for in the UN Convention Against Corruption, which we can easily incorporate into our domestic legislation by indicating or putting in place measures that can address the issue of unexplained fraud. And I'm raising that specifically in the context of preventative measures. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, yes, I think preventative measures are crucial, and one of the issues we'll be talking to in different consultation meetings in the next couple of months is to get a sense of how important people feel that is and what they feel the practical systems and measures that could be taken. But One of the things, there are several things that we're looking at. When, say, for example, we talk to the private sector, we want to cooperate with the Institute on Corporate Governance, but things like codes of conduct that actually work and are enforced, things like integrity pledges, can all be a means of education, but also getting people to make an explicit statement that they are against corruption and that they will try to build integrity in their organizations. And unexplained wealth, I think there's been discussions with the Ministry of Finance and obviously now the new revenue agency as to whether they have a role to play in exposing, tackling, investigating people who appear to have unexplained wealth, and often that can be targeted through the tax system because it can be, first of all, the first red flag is that person doesn't seem to be paying the tax that their lifestyle seems to warrant should be paid. So those are part of the discussions that we'll be looking at and trying to establish where we can play a reasonable role with our limited resources. And certainly preventative is a huge part of our engagement with the broad civil society and other sectors of society to get them to, as I say, not just complain about it, but actually take action within their sectors where they are to tackle corruption and to prevent corruption. Projects, but that's something else that the IPPR is concerned about. And Fish Lot has thrown up has really revealed that corruption is not really a national issue alone, and certainly in terms of the grand corruption, often and almost always has an international context, and Fish Lot in particular has that. So it's not just Iceland, but it's also all the countries that facilitated and were actively involved in the money laundering that went on. So it's a whole number of dispensations. So we are currently working with Transparency International in Iceland to try and get accountability for the part of Fish Lot where we haven't seen any arrests, which is the Samari principals in Iceland who appear to have tried to export or did export corruption to Namibia. And they have not yet been held accountable. An investigation is ongoing, but it's well over 2 years now. And Namibia at least has acted and arrested people, suspects. So we are looking at that. And we're also looking at the other issue which has been raised previously by the reposition, which is getting our assets back that were lost in Fish Lot. And I think to some extent internationally there is interest in Fish Lot because it presents a sort of test case to see whether people who are involved in the financial systems in different countries around the world can be held accountable for something that happened in Namibia, but was not only limited to Namibia. And also whether it's very difficult to get assets back in corruption cases, but to reclaim assets, I think it's a very important step that we have to try and take, although it's complicated. So, we are involved in various discussions with international partners, principally the Transparency International branch in Iceland, to try and get more action on this. And hopefully, one of the things we're very concerned about is the fact that the Ministry of Justice has not forwarded the extradition requests for the 3 Icelandic suspects wanted in Namibia to Iceland, despite the requests apparently haven't been ready for a number of months. We don't really know why Namibia is delaying on that, why the Ministry of Justice is delaying on that. But it's very important in terms of this international accountability that we play our rightful role. And yes, it's true that Iceland has a system, a legal system, which doesn't allow their citizens to be extradited, so they may well turn it down. But under the UN Convention Against Corruption, they then have an obligation to take those cases against the individuals forward within Iceland, within their domestic context. So if we do send, and I hope we will send soon, the extradition request to Iceland, it will bolster the case for accountability within Iceland. And generally, it will mean that Namibia is doing the right thing in terms of international accountability on Fish Lot and making sure that everybody who was involved, not just the Namibians, are held to account. Yeah.
I think how important or how will you establish trust if I know that there's this platform and I can go there, give this very sensitive information, what will set you apart from say someone going to the SEC or going to the police, and how important or how will you ensure that you are effective in being able to assist those persons?
Okay, so what we're offering is initially an online system, but it will be encrypted. That's why we have an ICT expert on the project. So I think it might be that the whistleblower will feel a level of confidence through that. I also think the IPPR has a certain standing in society, which might encourage some people to come forward as an independent body. So, you know, we're hoping those factors will establish the trust. But ultimately, it's down to the whistleblower. They might feel it's better to go directly to a journalist. They might feel that they should try the official routes, the SEC or the police, the ombudsman. But so, you know, we're not saying we're not trying to monopolize the space, but we need to offer this opportunity from civil society for whistleblowers to come forward. So it will be a challenge for us to establish truth. And to be honest, it's the part of this project that worries me the most, because having the responsibility to protect somebody's identity, for example, crucial thing that we have to do very, very seriously. So, you know, we have to approach it in that way in order to establish the necessary level of trust. Okay, sorry.
So, the union has announced that if the government does not, if the government claims to not involve raising the salary for civil servants, then it's tools down to them. Is the IPPR a part of the thing?
About the salary situation in government?
Yes.
Not directly, certainly not for this project. But obviously we do other work, we analyse the budget and so on, which will be crucial towards, as regards any pressure there might be for civil society increment, public service increments. So, you know, that's certainly on one of our concerns, but it's not directly corruption, so we won't be covering it under this project. Thank you.
Could you review the cost of this financial support of the US Embassy for this 3-year project?
Yeah, I can't remember the actual figure in US dollars, but really it amounts, depending on exchange rate fluctuations, the amount amounts to about $1 million a year. So about $3 million over the project period. And because it's quite difficult for us to establish funding like that, the only other project we have on that level is the democracy reports management parliament. And also to get multi-year support, we are very, very thankful to the US Embassy for that. And yeah, it's basically $3 million over 3 years. Okay, I think you know, I didn't want this to go too long because we will have more activities and events coming up, but I wanted to get this on your radar and hopefully to get some initial publicity out to the media, and you'll be hearing a lot more from us in the coming weeks and months. So we can end there. There are some questions outside. Thanks very much.